Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our post-institute workshop. And today we are very happy that we have Michael Sines, who is at the University of Texas, Dallas, with us. And Michael is also very involved with the College Reading and Learning Association and what previously was their peer international peer mentor certification. And I think now it's called peer educator, but I'm sure he's going to share information on that. He is a wealth of information, and he's got the answer to all questions so far, because we've had Michael present before. And I think he's also going to be sharing some information about the application process with you. And to those of you who aren't familiar, I will say that several of our programs have certainly used the curriculum that's available, and we have that workbook available in the office, and we're happy to send you a copy. If your program does not already have a copy, just send me an email and we'll get that in the mail to you. That sort of guides you through all of the activities. And Michael will talk to you all about the program of becoming, how programs become certified. At first, it seemed a little overwhelming to me, but once I really looked at the whole picture, it's really very doable. It's just tracking what you're doing. And it's also a great framework. So I know we're going to learn a lot. Are there any questions before we begin? Okay, we'll be going from 9 until noon today. And I'm glad you're here, troopers, those people that have been in the Institute all week and still want more. I love that. But, we tried to tie a post-institute workshop, something that folks have asked for, and this is certainly something that folks have asked for more information about. So this time, Mike, I'll turn it over to you. And again, we're just so glad that you're able to join us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here again, speaking in front of this wonderful audience. This workshop is going to be a little bit more interactive in the sense that if there's ever a question, just feel free to interrupt me or put it in the chat. And maybe Drew can monitor the chat and tell me if there's anything that pops up. But I hope this is more of a discussion as opposed to me lecturing for 3 hours. And then we'll do a few activities. So kind of how I break up this workshop is it's going to be a two-parter. The first part is going to be discussing all about certification and how to build that framework like Drew mentioned. And then the second part, after we take a small break, because staring at my face for 3 hours is probably not ideal. So we'll take a small break and then come back and look how the new application that we just launched a few days ago, which I'm very excited about. I've been talking about this new application for about 2 years now. So it's finally ready to go. And the good part about this new setup is that whether you're doing a tutor application or a peer educator application, a lot of the things look the same now, as opposed to having different requirements for the different programs. So let me share my screen because I do have a PowerPoint. Do I have? You're on mute. Okay, now I can see it. Got it. Here we go. All right, I'm gonna make this full screen. All right, I'm gonna turn off my video so it's not distracting me, but I'll have the chat up in this box as well if there are any questions as we go. But like I said, feel free to unmute yourself and just yell to get my attention. So, all right. Before we get started, I kind of want to hear from who's here at this presentation. I call it 4 corners just because really when we're talking about certification, there's really 4 types of people that would be sitting through this presentation. And so take a look at this screen and kind of tell me in the chat or verbally where you stand. Do you know anything about certification? Do you know anything about CRLA? Or I know Drew mentioned there are some certified programs. We've, been in touch with this organization for a long time. So in the chat, let me know where you are between 1, 2, 3, and 4. Somewhere between 3 and 4. Okay, that's good.
And again, for anyone that may not know, the chat window is the little icon down at the very bottom of your screen that says chat. Just click on that, and then a window will pop up, and you can and then type. And we have we have Dr. Danny Roberts Dom from University of South Florida. She's somewhere between a 3 and a 4. Gwen Carey at FAU is a 1. We are on the second round of certification. That's great. Mary Kendall, 3 and 4 down at Indian River State College.
Awesome. That's good. Yeah, I'm reading the chat here, and yeah, Gwen, we've seen that across the country with the mentoring programs and the engagement with returning from the pandemic. I don't know what Florida did, but UT Dallas, we had more of a hybrid approach when we came back in the fall. Some were online, some were hybrid, we made up a new word called de-densification, which just meant half the class came one day and half the class came another day. And so what we really found is that the students were so focused on that new schedule and adapting that they just didn't have time for any of our peer mentor programs. And if they weren't on campus, they weren't going to make a special trip to do it. So yeah, we've seen attendance take quite a bit of hit on our return back, but hopefully we can, get back to a normal type program when we come back in the spring. So good. I'm glad to see everyone's responses. All right. So in this agenda, we're going to kind of discuss CRLA and ITTPC. It is a mouthful. I've been with CRLA for about 9 years, and it used to be IMTPC, like Drew mentioned, with the mentor being the M. And then we decided to change it and be more encompassing. And so I've been really working on memorizing the IPTPC because it is a mouthful when you have to say it over and over again. So I'll explain the changes there. We'll look at the 4 criteria for certification. And really, I should change that. Just 4 criteria for a solid framework of a mentor peer education program. Certification is just the bonus, in my opinion. When you look at the 4 criteria, it really just sets up a way to build out or enhance your peer mentor program. And they just happen to coincide with being a certified program. But, and I'll get into this in a bit, but you do not have to be a certified program to follow these 4 criteria. It is a great framework to have even if certification isn't your thing. Then we'll take a break and then look at the review or review the application process, and then look at best practices, and then any tips and tricks that I've found or people that have been certified already can share, and then we'll close it out. So hopefully these next few hours fly by. So CRLA, we are a national organization, international organization now actually, and we have 2 main certification programs. We have our tutoring program and we have our peer educator program. The tutor program has been around a lot longer. They used to have more in-depth requirements for certification. And the peer educator program has been around for about 20 years. And it used to be called the mentor program. And we kept getting a lot of questions of, well, I have an academic coaching program, or I have a disability services program, or I have a supplemental instruction program that's not really mentoring. So then we looked at the name and said, you know what, we need to have a more inclusive name, not just mentor, but include a lot of the other programs that are a peer-to-peer type relationship. So we changed it to peer educator. So you'll hear me say peer educator, you'll hear me say mentor. We call ours peer leaders. So it all means the same thing when I'm talking. It's just that whatever word you use, just know that it's all the same when it comes out of my mouth. So A peer mentor, a peer tutor is a person of similar status to the individual being mentored or tutored. And so we've, for the past 2 years, looked at each of the programs, the tutoring program and the peer educator program, and they were vastly different. So we tried to say, how can we make this easier? Because we're seeing more and more hybrid programs. We're seeing some tutors that want to be peer educators, and we see some peer educators that want to be tutors. If I were to ask this audience, what, you can put it in the chat, what would be the difference between a tutor program and a peer educator program? What does that mean when you see that they're two different programs? I wish I could see if it says like someone's typing so I know to wait, or there it is. All right.
Okay.
One's more academic, one's more social, one's a study buddy. Yeah, that's kind of how we kind of define it at UT Dallas. If you're in a tutoring program, it is basically about academics, and we're going to help you do better in this specific content area, whether that's math or writing or science or the arts. So any peer tutor program, usually you aren't matched with someone throughout the whole semester. And with a peer educator program, usually you are assigned a mentor and you talk with them about a variety of different things. It could be academic, it could be social, it could be professional, but there's a more in-depth relationship in our peer educator programs than you see in our tutor programs. So that's kind of the definition I like to use when talking about the difference between tutor and peer educator. So ITTPC, which is the tutor application, provides recognition and positive reinforcement for tutors' successful work. It does set an internationally accepted standard of skills and training. And the training part is the big part of this certifications, and we'll get into that in a bit. It's endorsed by all these acronyms. When you look at the peer educator side, again, it is pretty much the same thing. But I like to hit on that second bullet point, that it allows you the freedom to create a program that challenges and helps develop your peer educators. And for the longest time, when I first started out in our Student Success Center at UT Dallas, I was always focused on the outcome of the program. So for our academic success coaching program, I was always focused on are the people that are coming to coaching, are they getting what they need? Are they feeling more confident in their study skills? Are they feeling more confident in their time management? And for the longest time, I was ignoring the other important aspect of our programs, which is developing our peer leaders. And that's when I kind of looked into CRLA and looked into certification and seeing how do I make a program that does both, that has the great outcomes, but also, trains these leaders and have them walk away with something that they can be proud of that they did throughout their time here at UT Dallas. So they really love getting the certificate at the end when they complete certification. We do a big party at the end of each semester, and we have their names printed on these wonderful certificate papers, and it's a real big thing that they like to do at the end of the year. So I think putting in that hard work and then having something physical is a great reminder that they're doing a good job. A little bit more about ITTPC. Like I said, it's been around for about 20 years. We certify campus mentor programs. Currently, we have over 200 programs that are currently certified. And the cool thing about the peer educator certification is that we just see a wide diversity of the programs that apply. So much so that we've had to change some of our requirements because and I'll get into the requirements in a bit, but it's just so evolving that we are trying to keep up with the different programs that are coming online and starting to create a variety of different things to help with the campus needs. So when I talk about levels of the certification, it's easy to think about level 1 is your basic peer educator certification. Level 2 is a more advanced certification, and level 3 is our master peer educator level. When you look at how we're building the blocks, you'll see in the topics that are required for certification that the level 1 topics are very much the foundation of what it means to be a solid peer educator. And then as you work your way up through the different levels, you'll see that the topics become more advanced. And I almost equate it to the certified peer educator. The level 1 is more of your undergraduate work, maybe your freshman, sophomore level classes. Your advanced is more your junior, senior level classes, and then your master level 3 is more your graduate work. And when you get into those graduate, classes, it's more discussion based and more theory based, as opposed to like a level 1, like the do's and don'ts of peer education. So those are the 3 levels, and you'll hear me talk about 3 levels as we move through the certification. This is probably the most important slide that you're going to see from me today. And the reason I say that is because even without certification, if certification just isn't your thing and you want to start at the bare bones requirements and the framework, these are the things that we look for in a certified program. These are the 4 components. I say 4, I'm really looking at that second check mark. And I call those the 4 pillars of certification. So if you've heard these before, great. There are a few updates, so bear with me while I go through them. But really, these 4 are the backbone of a great framework of a program that really has a solid start to finish. And you can think about the 4 pillars chronologically, because first you select the peer educators or the peer mentors. Second, you train them. Third, they get their mentor experience. And then fourth, you evaluate the mentor after it's all said and done. And I'll show you in the second part of this workshop how we can fill out all these things in the application. The program narrative is a big part, because you're just telling the review team, an in-depth knowledge of your program and having them have a better understanding of what your program does and the types of people that come through your program. So let's start with this first pillar. This first pillar is important because it's how you get started with quality candidates. And so these are the 3 main requirements for certification in the selection pillar. Now, when I say we look at, or we do, I'm talking about our review team. So our review team, once you apply, your application goes to our volunteer group of reviewers. And what they do is they look at your application, and then they look at our requirements, and they're just checking off, did they do this? Did they do this? Or do they do this? And hopefully the answer is yes to all those things. And so the next section I'm going to talk about are all those requirements that we look for when you submit your application. But as I'm going to say throughout this whole presentation, even if certification isn't your thing, these are great standards to set for your program, whether you are building one from scratch or you have one and you want to kind of enhance it a little bit. So the first requirement is the minimum GPA. And for those that have heard me speak before, this is a newer update. It used to be a 3.0 GPA. And we've changed that to just a minimum GPA required, meaning whatever GPA works for your program, that's what we're going to approve. We just want to know that you have a minimum GPA set. The reason that we changed it from 3.0 is because, like I said, we have a very diverse set of peer programs that apply. And one that we've been seeing pop up is academic recovery peer mentors. And with these academic recovery peer mentors, they are students that have maybe gone on probation, and they've taken some workshops, and they've hustled, and they've now fixed their GPA, and they're off probation, and they've become peer mentors to help other people get off probation and learn from their mistakes. But I would get emails saying, hey, we are in this academic recovery program, but your 3.0 GPA, I mean, they won't hit that because they were on probation, and they've busted their butt to get to a 2.5. And we're like, you know what, we shouldn't be having that barrier up, because that it was just an arbitrary number. No, there was no reason that was 3.0. So that first one, we just want to make sure that whatever program needs that you have, that you set a minimum GPA requirement for your leaders. I've seen 2.5, I've seen 3.0, I've seen 3.5. Again, those are going to be the needs of your program, but there needs to be a requirement that is set for your program. The second criteria that we look for is the interview with the mentor and the trainer supervisor. And I've given this presentation a few times, and I always like to highlight our own program at UT Dallas. I've just always assumed that any program that is hiring mentors will interview them. That just, in my mind, that would make sense to me. You want to know who is going to be applying for your program. And then I met with one of our programs, our freshman mentor program on campus, and I was giving them this lecture about the requirements, and I was breezing through the selection, and they paused and they said, "Hey, can you go back to the interview? We don't do an interview." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean you don't do an interview?" And they said, "Well, we have 800 applicants that apply to be our freshman mentors, and we select 500 of them, and we don't have time to do an interview." And I was like, "Oh." So they were just looking at the application and just picking candidates to be freshman mentors from the paper application. And for anyone that's hired, how dangerous that could be, picking someone without even talking to them. So I spoke with them, and we implemented a plan of doing group interviews and bringing them in waves, because there was just so many that you could not interview 500 people. Your semester would be over by the time you interviewed everyone. So that's an important one I like to highlight. Just make sure that you are touching base with the applicant when you hire them. I say hire, I don't, some people are volunteers. So that's why it's called selection and not hiring. So if you do select your leaders this way, make sure that there is an interview process, and that you are meeting with them and asking them some more questions that are just not on the application. And the last one for the selection pillar is 2 or more references from faculty or former supervisors or counselors. And this could be in a variety of different ways. If you're hiring or selecting a lot of peer educators, I recommend a form and just having what you want to see from your peer leaders, and having more of a checkbox. And so when you send it to the reference, they can easily fill out these questionnaires that you say, "Hey, this candidate is applying. Would you recommend them for this? How is their time management?" Things that they can speak to that would make sense for your program. I've seen other programs ask for full-blown letters of recommendation from faculty or staff. I've seen phone calls. So anything that really allows you to check a reference on the people that are going to be coming through your program. The last thing we mentioned here is optional. It's definitely not a requirement, but it is nice to see some personality type assessments on certain peer programs. I know our peer advisors in the residence halls use this. They like to match like personalities. And I've seen some programs do the opposite, where they like to match opposite personality types. So whether that's a Myers-Briggs, or any type of other personality type assessment, they like to really just see more in depth of what generally this leader brings to the table. Any questions on selection? This is a quarter of the way through, and this is when Drew mentioned earlier that it does seem daunting to look at the application requirements, but hopefully we're going to break them down enough to make them easily digestible. And the new application now is a lot easier to save and come back to later, as opposed to just trying to fill it out in one shot, which we'll take a look at in a second. So I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, so I'll move on to the training. Now I'm going to put a pin in this one because we are going to talk about training a little more in depth when I show you the application. So here, I'm just going to talk about the types of training that we see and discuss the SOAs a little bit. So again, this is going to be the meat of your program. When we talk about the foundation of a good peer educator program, it's nice to have standards for your hiring and your evaluation, but the training is really the meat of this presentation. And we're going to discuss ways that you can do the training. So the format can be a combination of any of the things you see here. The most common one we see is a training day or two right before school starts. Some programs do an entire course. For those that are certified in the chat, what types of formats do you use to deliver your trainings? So while some people are typing, I'm going to kind of give you my example. Gwen started out in person for the first year. As we grew, we switched to live virtual to accommodate varying schedules and multiply camp. Yeah, that is big, especially during the pandemic. But we're finding it's harder and harder to get everyone at the same place at the same time. And so what we do is we've started loading our dates into the calendar a semester in advance. So for example, we are currently hiring for our spring semester right now. And in the hiring letter, we say, hey, here are the training dates for the spring. By accepting this, you're agreeing to put this on your calendar. So that's been kind of helpful, but we took our level 1 institute workshops, we took them online, and I thought participation and attendance would drop once we did that. And for the last 3 semesters, we've had nearly 100% at each of our institutes for our level 1 workshop. So I was shocked because that's not at all what I expected, but yeah, going to a live virtual presentation, especially during the pandemic, but I think we're going to continue that moving forward because it was helpful with everyone's schedule. We have 100+ leaders. It's hard to find a room on campus that can fit everyone as well, especially if we're trying to, safely distance from each other. So thanks, Gwen, for that. So with the types of formats, again, we've seen a combination of anything you see on the screen. Our first year leader program that sits in our university seminar in the fall. The spring before the fall semester, they go through a 1-hour credit course, and each week, they do a training topic, that is of the required topics for CRLA. But that's how they get their training hours in, and then they don't start until the following semester. So the last bullet on here, the self-paced training, that is an option, but it's limited to a couple of hours of the required 10 hours. And I'll get into the training hours in a second, but just know that self-paced is possible, but you're limited to how many you can count towards your hours of certification. So with the curriculum requirements, and this is something that we've been working on for a while, our standards, outcomes, and assessments. We have a great document on our CRLA website. Let me look at the link real quick. If you go in your search bar, or you just type crla.net, and then on the link it says certifications, and then if you scroll down to International Peer Educator Training Certification Program, There's a button right below the tab, or right above the tabs, that says download the IPTPC standards, outcomes, and assessments. This is a document we've been working on for a long time, that really eases the workload of people starting from scratch. And what I mean by standards, outcomes, and assessments is basically for every training topic that we have developed some standards, outcomes, and assessments for each one. And what that means is when you look at the topic, it'll give you a wide range of outcomes that are expected for a leader after completing that training, what they should be able to do, and the assessment of how you can assess if they learn something through that workshop. So it's a great document. It's through level 1 so far. If you go to the tutor side, if you are looking at the CRLA website and you go to the tutor certification, they have all 3 levels completed. So if you're looking for more advanced levels, they're very similar topics too. So if you can't find something in our level 2 because it's not out yet, and you want to look at level 2 and level 3 workshop SOAs, I highly recommend going to the tutor side, because you can kind of see what they've done for the tutors. And really, for the most part, not for every single topic, but for the most part, you can use tutor and peer educator interchangeably. Some topics are obviously geared more towards tutors, but if you look at some of the more softer skills, you can kind of see where we're going to be writing out our level 2 and level 3 topics as well. So again, I'm going to kind of skip through this training part because we're going to talk about it in depth in the second half of this workshop. But we do have required topics. It used to be, and this is one of the big changes that if you've heard me speak before, it used to be we have 7 or 8 required topics for each level, and then you can fill out the rest with electives. And we've changed that. We've changed it to where we've categorized the different workshops, and it's more of a choose your own curriculum. So if it's a category of communication skills, we say, here are the list of topics for the communication skills, pick 2 of them. So you get to develop the program more for your needs, as opposed to saying you have to do these required topics, and then you can fill it out with the rest of the hours available. But for each topic is a minimum of 30 minutes we like you to speak on. That's my personal rule is 1 topic equals 1 hour. And that's how I kind of, frame it in my head. Some people frame it differently. They like to maybe do 3 or 4 topics in a 2-hour block. And that's fine. And we'll talk about how you can space that out and build that out in your training in the second part of this presentation. So I keep talking about the hours required and things like that, but going back to our levels 1, 2, and 3, this is the difference between the 3 levels. Level 1 is 10 hours of training, which if you've heard me speak, it used to be 15. So we've lowered that to match the tutor side. So level 1 is 10 hours of training. And again, we'll look at the training topics in the next block. But level 2 is level 1 completed training plus an additional 10 hours. So if you think about it on a grand scope, each level is going to be 10 hours of training. So when you're thinking to yourself, how much training do I want? How much training can I do? If you're a 1-person shop and you're the one in charge of all of this, do you have enough time to do 30 hours of training during the semester or during the year? If you have help, great. And if not, this is something that we say, how much bandwidth do you have to put on these training workshops? The other thing that is we ask when you're talking about which level should I apply for is how long do you keep your peer leaders? If you keep your peer leaders for a semester or 2, I think level 3 is ambitious because it takes a while to complete the training levels. And if you only keep them for a semester or 2, they're going to have a very hard time getting enough requirements all the way to level 3 to justify you having a level 3 program. So when you are applying, if applying is your thing, just keep in mind that how long do you keep your leaders? If you keep them, 4, 5, 6 semesters, great, level 3, if you want to give them that much training. But there's no right or wrong answer here. If you have a, how do I put it? I've seen programs that keep their leaders for 5, 6 semesters, but only do level 1, because that's what they want to do. They only want to offer level 1, and that's great. There's not a problem. And I've seen people that do keep their leaders for 3 semesters that do level 3. Again, it's intense, but if that's how you want the scope of your program, then that's great. So again, there's no wrong answer here. The only things, what can I do? What can I offer these leaders, or what can my unit offer these leaders? But this is the training that the training requirements for each of the levels. So just think about each level is going to be 10 hours of training. Any questions on the training aspect? Because we're going to get into it a lot more as we move through the application in the second half. For UT Dallas, what we do in level 1, again, like I mentioned, we have our level 1 institute where we plan it well in advance, and it's 2 Sundays out of the year or out of the semester. And they know in advance when we're having those level 1 workshops. And for our center, it is mandatory to complete level 1 by the end of your first semester. So it's not optional for level 1. This is our basic training that you have to do to complete or continue your employment to the next semester. Level 2 and level 3 look very different on our campus because it's voluntary. You don't have to do it. You don't get paid to do it. It is a professional development thing that we offer. And usually the people that do level 2 and level 3 are the ones that turn into our team leaders or our peer supervisors, whatever you call them. We call ours team leaders. And so when you look at our workshops schedule, you see a lot of the things that would make sense for a team leader. So one of our level 2 workshops is supervising your peers and how to build out training. And so they get this training done before being a peer leader or a team leader. And it kind of helps enhance their professional development there. So if there are no questions on our second pillar of training, I'll move on to the third one, which is our experience. So the first pillar, we've hired them. The second pillar, we've trained them. And now this third pillar is how they get their experience. The simplest thing here to remember is just experience time equals contact time, whether that's in person, whether it's telephone, an email, a text message, if they go grab coffee, anytime they're in contact with the mentee, that counts. So when we talk about certification and what that means, like Drew mentioned earlier, this is where you have to decide for your program, how are you going to track this component? Some people track it on old school pen and paper session logs. Some people do it virtually now with a Google form or a Qualtrics form, and they submit their time there. But basically what we want to see here is that you're able to track the experience that's coming through to the peer educators. This is another change that we had for, again, if you've heard me speak before, level 1 used to be 50 hours. And we've got feedback from a lot of peer educator programs saying, hey, that's a lot. We'll never hit 50 hours because we only have a 1-to-1 ratio and they meet 3 times a year. So hitting 50 hours of experience would never happen. So we lowered our requirement for level 1 is 25 hours. Level 2 is an additional 25 hours and level 3 is an additional 25 hours. So if you go back between this slide and the experience slide with the training and the experience, these are the 2 slides that the leaders care about, because once the leader hits 10 hours of training and once they hit 25 hours of experience, you are able to give them a certificate that they've completed level 1. I like to do it at the end of each semester. I know programs that do it on a rolling basis. So the minute they hit that 10 hours of training and the 25 hours of experience, they give them their certificate. For me, it's a little easier to do it on a semester basis, but that's all the peer educators care about, is finishing their training and getting their experience hours. Once they do that, they are certified. So again, as CRLA, what we do once you apply for certification and it's approved, we grant you the permission to certify the leaders that come through your program. So it's not anything that CRLA does. You're not going to be sending me a list that I'm going to give you certificates for all of your leaders. Once you're certified, I give you the template and you're the one that gets to certify the leaders as they come through. So, and there's no audit. We're very much on the trust system. If you tell me this is how you track your leaders, we're going to believe you. We're not going to bust down your door at 3 a.m. asking for paperwork and paper trails of your certified leaders. We trust that, if what you submitted to us in your application, that you're going to do. So again, the biggest thing here when we talk about experience is making sure that you're counting it with contact time with students. One pitfall we see when people apply is that when they say, oh, how do you track it? They say, oh, well, we just use their timesheets. Well, for us, timesheets, our SI leaders are, they have 3 hours of sessions, but then they also have 3 hours of prep time. Prep time has nothing to do with experience with the mentees. So just be cautious if you're counting your time. Make sure that you know that office hours or things that they're not actually having contact with the students, that does not count towards that experience hour. All right, the last pillar that we have here is the evaluation pillar. And this one, again, is a great way to kind of wrap up your framework circle. And what I mean by that is we've started with the hiring and we're going to end with the evaluation. And every good program needs a good evaluation process to make sure that what your goals are for the program are actually being achieved. So the first requirement is that the evaluation occurs annually, and that the mentees evaluate their mentors, and then that the results are shared with the mentors. So there's a lot of different ways that can happen. And again, remember, this is a minimum requirement. So if you want to evaluate the mentors every semester or every month, that is up to you. The minimum requirement is that it just happens at least once a year. And again, the mentees need to evaluate their mentors. The easiest way that we do that is send out a survey and say, hey, can you let us know how the mentor is doing? And then finally having that follow-up meeting with the mentor saying, hey, here's what we noticed in our observation or our evaluation, and here's what the mentees are saying. And then here's things you're doing well, and here's things that we can work on if that's part of the process. So yeah, any questions on the evaluation?
Michael, I'm a little bit behind asking this question or asking you to discuss this just a little bit, but
Yeah.
where you're looking at these hours of training and contact and then evaluation. Will you talk a little bit about how, because I know some folks are probably thinking, oh my gosh, how will I be able to do this? Because we're looking at this many hours that I need to coordinate this and that. But and I know that Gwen can also share information about what she's done at at Florida Atlantic University on using training that is already in place at your university, at your state college, that fills a lot of those requirements, and that you can then build upon it, with those things that are maybe more specific for us in working post-secondary, working with students with intellectual disabilities in the post-secondary setting, but how you access trainings for your mentor program that are already going on.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because that's one thing that we get, especially from newer programs or programs that are have limited bandwidth to put on these trainings. And I'll kind of tell you what it looks like at the University of Texas at Dallas. Currently, we have a lot of certified programs on our campus, but it really starts from a partnership with a lot of different units on campus. And so what I mean by that is uh, when we hire our leaders, because they are paid to do their peer education work. So they are officially considered university employees. So their training starts before they even get to us. When they are hired on, they do a 2-hour university orientation that our career center puts on, and that's mandatory. So even before they start with us, they have to do a 2-hour training, and it's the same thing that you would see at like a new orientation when you go to a new job. But it's basically, here's the university, here's the timesheet, here is what you expect working on campus, here are the emergency numbers, so things like that. So even before they get to us, they have 2 hours of training under their belt. And then the other thing that's not done by our center is we have FERPA training, and we also have Title IX training that all university employees have to do. So those are another 2 hours of training, and that's done, at least on our campus, it's done with a e-learning module, which is just a self-paced module on our Blackboard system. And they have to get a certificate once they complete the module and the quizzes. So so before they even get to us, they already have done 4 hours of university training. And so that's helpful when you're thinking of outside services that can help count towards those training. And I know we said we would talk about the training more in depth in the second half, but you'll see some of the topics that we discuss. And my biggest piece of advice is to get partners across campus that can help do these trainings. So I recognize that I am not smart enough to talk about mental health and how to overcome some of these challenges. So that's when we bring in the counseling center to help talk about an hour or two about mental health and signs to look for, things like that. So there's a wide range of places you can gather material. And one kind of cheat that I like to do when I'm trying to limit myself from performing 10 hours of training a semester, what I like to do is assign them maybe a TED Talk or something that is something that I found on YouTube that is maybe a 30-45 minute discussion, and count that towards their self-paced hours, but also bring it back into our weekly meeting and assign it as a required training, and then use our weekly meeting in person or via Zoom to have a discussion about it. So I'm not the one that was facilitating the training, but I'm the one facilitating the discussion on how we can use that in our peer education programs. And so it's kind of like a little cheat, because I'm not the one that did the presentation, but I'm definitely the one that's facilitating the in-person training. So does that help kind of answer some of those questions, Drew?
Absolutely. Yes. I just didn't want folks to get overwhelmed and leave us before you really get into the part of sharing that, because whenever you said, well, I know that the first time I was hearing all of this, I thought, oh my gosh, how would I coordinate all of this? And then whenever folks started talking about how they access all those things that are already in place,
Yeah.
and then when folks started sharing that oftentimes there's already a CRLA on your campus. There's
Yeah.
already a mentor program on your campus, and you can utilize a lot of what they're doing. Then I was like, okay. And then your idea right there of different ways that you can find those resources, that makes it even more doable. Not that you want to skip out, but you want to find all those ways so you're not having to look at so many hours of training yourself. So yes, thank you.
Yeah, I always say work smarter, not harder. And in this case, again, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. We're going to look at the topics here in the second part, but you'll know where to find a lot of these resources. And at the bare minimum, if you are having trouble finding learning objectives, or you're having trouble building out a workshop, just contact me. We have a whole curriculum full of trainings that we do. Because one thing I haven't talked about is I launched the Institute for Peer Education at UT Dallas, and we have a partnership with a lot of the other programs on campus where we do their training for them. So it was through a grant through our UT system, and I had this idea of, hey, I know how hard it was for me to, do this by myself. So let's create an institute on campus where we can all standardize the terminology and what it means to be a peer educator at UT Dallas. And so the programs now, that if they're starting a mentor program or they're starting to look at training, they can come to the institute to help fulfill some of those training needs. So the institute doesn't cover every single option. Like, we can't do all 10 hours because, again, at the end of the day, there are program specific trainings that only the program manager can speak on. But for the most part, you can find a lot of those hours elsewhere. And so if you are struggling, if training isn't your forte, contact me and I can share any resource that I have with you. Also, we have a great network listserv that, I see it once a week. Hey, does anyone have a great workshop on public speaking? Yeah, let me send that to you. So again, we're a great network, and we like to share ideas. So if training does seem daunting to you, never fear, because there is a lot of resources out there to help you. So thank you, Drew, for pointing that out, because I do remember when I was sitting through this presentation for the first time, it took me about 1.5 years before I even thought about applying for certification, because I felt like it was a lot. And if you break it down into smaller digestible chunks, it's a lot easier to handle. So that's a great question. So this overview slide, again, if application or if the certification application is not part of your future plans, you can just ignore that third column where it says application fee. But if you just wanted to work on the framework, this is kind of the breakdown of hours for the requirement. So again, 10 hours of training for level 1, 25 of experience, and then you're just adding the levels or the hours as you go down the levels. If certification is your thing, it's very cost efficient. Level 1 is $150, level 2 is $250, and level 3 is $350. And that's the application fee. And that is for the program, not like per leader that you submit. That is $150 that covers your entire program, whether you're certifying one peer educator or you're certifying 1 million peer educators, it's still the same fee. And so it's very cost efficient. I had one gentleman, after he was approved, he was ready to cut me a check for like $10,000 because they had 100 leaders on. And I was like, no, that's not what we do. It is $150, but I appreciate that you were going to spend $10,000 on certification. It's a little pricey, but that's not what we do. We do it by program. So there's that little caveat at the bottom, multiple program, multiple location. So what that means is, like for us in the Student Success Center, we have our supplemental instruction program. We have academic success coaching. We have a peer-led team learning program. So we have a variety of different peer education programs. We submitted under the Student Success Center peer leader. That was the application. But since there were 3 programs underneath it, we added $50 per level for each program. So if you have a combined program that you want to certify multiple programs, you can submit one application and just add $50 per level per program to that fee. Or if you just have one program and you just follow the application schedule right there on the first part. We also have people that have the same program over multiple campuses, and that's kind of the same thing. If you have the same program across 3 campuses, it would just be $50 per level for those other 2 that you're adding on. And what we don't want to see, we don't want to see people that have drastically different programs trying to apply under the same application, because again, you're going to have different training, you're going to have different training, you're going to have different experience, you're going to have different hiring expectations. So those are going to be a little different. So the caveat I like to do when discussing certification and applications is it under the same umbrella? Like, is it the same group of people that are doing the training, doing the hiring? If it's the same group and they're all housed in the same area, that's probably an application that could be combined. But if it's just people in different areas that have different standards, then you probably want to do your own application. So any questions on this page? Okay, so we're almost done with this first part, and then we can take a little break. So once you do apply for certification and you meet all the requirements, you get this lovely program certificate that you can hang up in your space, and it says how long you're certified for, etc. And then we also send you a template. It's in a PDF format, but it allows you to create any certificate for the mentors that come through your program. So this is the mentor one, and the next one is the coaching one. So if you have a coaching program, so under the peer educator, we do have those specific titles. If you have something that is a coach, a mentor, a classroom leader, supplemental instruction, we have those individual certificates that we can send you. And then here is where you put in the leader's name once they complete the requirements. And again, the main thing to recognize on the application part is we just want to know how you're tracking it all. How are you tracking their training? How are you tracking their experience? And I'll kind of show you what that looks like when we get into the application part, about what kind of wordings we're looking for and things like that. So this last section talks about the timeline and the stages of certification. So if you've applied before and you kind of know what this one looks like, this was the 135 model, where your new application, if you're applying for the first time, it was good for 1 year. And then after 1 year, you're going to be doing the reflection and renewal certification. And then once you submitted that one is good for 3 years. And then after that, you're just recertifying every 5 years. And that was kind of getting a little convoluted with programs coming in at different levels and different stages. So we just simplified it and said, okay, any new application is good for 2 years. So that application fee, that if you do level 1, it's $150, and that'll cover you for 2 years. After 2 years, you're going to be submitting your renewal and reflection application. And then that'll be good for 4 years. So you would be paying the application fee again in the 4 years, and you're just renewing every 4 years after that. Now, this is why I kind of stress about knowing which level you want to come in, is because if let's say you started at level 1 and then you got through it and you're a few years into it and you're like, you know what, I want to do level 2 now. You have to start a level 2 at a new application. You can't renew at a level 2. You have to start at the new application year. So that's why I recommend to everyone that applies, make sure you come in at the level that you think you're going to be at over the next few years, because if you decide to upgrade or enhance your trainings later, you have to start the new application over again. So we want you to get the most bang for your buck and not have to, lose those years of certification if you're in the renewal stage and you want to go back to a different level. So that's all I have on the first part of this presentation, all about certification and the requirements. And like I said, I try and simplify it into just those 4 pillars. So even if certification and applying for certification is not your thing, I definitely recommend using the framework of those 4 pillars because it is helpful in building out any training program that you might want to do. So I'll hold for a second to see if there are any questions on this part of the presentation. All right, it doesn't look like there are any questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys a 15-minute break. We'll come back at 10:20 and start with part 2 of the presentation and looking at the application and any tips and tricks for certification and building out your program. So I'll be around in the chat if anyone has any questions, but we'll be back at 10:20.
Thank you, Michael. And thanks everyone. Let's take that break and we'll be back at 10:20.
All right, everybody, it is 10:20 on my clock. So we will skip to the second part, which is all about completing the application and just kind of some discussion of how to build out your program. So I kind of want to hear from a few of you. Really, there's 2 parts. One, if you already have mentors, I know Gwen has a program that's certified. If you already have mentors, how are you using the mentors currently? And if you don't have mentors, how do you think you might be able to use them in your program or your area? So I'm not trying to pick on Gwen, but Gwen, can you, if you're here, can you tell everyone how you use your mentors?
Hello. So our mentors are primarily social. They are not tutors. They are not study buddies. We encourage our students to come to their professors with any academic questions. The mentors are to help the students become socially engaged appropriately within the campus community. So they meet up to go to clubs, to go to dances, to go to special events, to have lunch together, to get involved in all of the things that college students do. So we've discovered that when our new students come in, for about the first 6 weeks, when they're not in class, they're all huddled together in a little group of new people on the couch in the atrium of the main building, afraid to kind of explore and start expanding out. So the mentors help them with that. And we try to match them not by personality type, but by areas of interest. So if this guy's really into music, maybe we have a mentor who likes music, and those might be the type of activities they'd get involved in. So to become socially involved in the school.
Awesome, thank you. Anyone else that currently has mentors or maybe an idea for how you would use your mentors?
Feel free to just turn your mute off and just share thoughts of, what you're thinking about with mentors, because Michael's certainly got lots of experience and can give you lots of ideas or examples of where that's working well.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of different, Mary says, in the classroom and for social activities. I think that's the neat thing about peer education moving forward, is that we're just seeing a lot of different applications of how to use these mentors, whether it's academic, professional, social, sometimes all 3, sometimes a hybrid of the 3. But really, I always call them extensions of you. Like if you were able to put yourself back onto campus and help these students with the things that or the things that they are struggling with, these mentors really become an extension of you. So our next activity before we get into the application is kind of thinking about this program narrative. So I'm going to give you, I'll give you a few minutes. Usually I do this in a small group breakout, but we're a small group already, and I want to make sure that we have people can chime in if they want, but I'm going to give you about 5 minutes of quiet time to kind of look at these questions, and maybe on a piece of paper that you have, or a piece of paper, or if you're on your computer, just open up a Word document and kind of answer these questions, because this will really help get you into the program narrative part about really defining what your program is or wants to do, and how we can better serve the students that are coming through. Joanne asks, is there a tried and true method of recruiting mentors? That's a good question, because it's really dependent on the campus and how involved some of the peer educators want to be. We're lucky at UT Dallas that there's a lot of people that are trying to, or that utilize our services. So when they utilize our service and they realize how helpful it is, they want to give back and apply to be a peer educator. But really, it starts with a word of mouth, and how we can talk with faculty members and other administrators of people that they're seeing come through their classes or come through their units, that really just stand out and that could better serve the community on campus. So that's kind of where I would start, is find the champions in the departments that you're looking for, or if there's just a general marketing, is to just post about it. We do some tabling events where we sit out in front of the quad and hand out cookies and just talk about our programs. So I wouldn't say there's a tried and true method, but definitely the place to start, if you're doing any sort of academics, is with faculty members and the ones that they see that are really do well in the course. And I don't mean just by grade, I mean they really understand the material, or they're already helping students with other materials that they can see in class. But that would be my advice, is to start asking and talking with the people that see the students on a more regular basis. But I've seen it also where people just put out a blind announcement in the career center or however you do on-campus employment, and they get qualified candidates from there as well. So again, not really tried and true, but hopefully that helps answer that question. But for UT Dallas, like specifically, the people that utilize our service are probably make up about 90% of the applicants to then become peer leaders themselves. I think they see the benefit of the program. They see how great our leaders are currently, and they just want to be a part of that. So it's kind of like a self-filling circle when you train great leaders and they put out a great product, and then the students use that product and they're like, well, I want to be a part of that. And then they decide to apply. So that's kind of where we get a majority of our leaders. Okay, so I'm going to shut up now. I'm going to go on mute, and I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to look at these questions if you haven't already started writing them down. What is the purpose of your program? Or if you're creating one, what would be the purpose? Who does your program serve? What are the student learning outcomes for the mentors and the mentees? Basically, like, if you participate in this program, what are you hoping to get out of it? By the end of this program, you should be able to do what? Does your program have a mission statement? How many mentors are you looking to hire or employ? And then finally, which levels do you think you want to certify? So I'm going to go on mute and let you write these down if you choose, or you can just answer in your head. But I will be asking for at least one volunteer to share a few of their answers here, just so we can, have that discussion going and get an idea of what these types of programs can look like.
And Mike, I just have to say that a lot of your questions here really align with what we've been discussing the past few days in our institute. We've been talking about student learning outcomes. So here's another example of thinking about student learning outcomes. We've been talking about mission statements and how important those are. And so your questions, when thinking about that for your mentor, the mentor part of your program. These just really fit. I just had to share that with you. These
Yeah,
fit.
I heard you talking earlier and mentioning the mission statement and the goals of the program. So I was like, yeah, we're gonna talk about that. That's exciting. So
Yeah. Thank you.
okay, so yeah, so I'm gonna go on mute 5 minutes. It is 10:30, so at 10:35, I will unmute myself and ask for at least one volunteer to kind of share what you are thinking or what you've currently done, and then we'll move on with that. So 5 minutes of silence. We are back. Do I have any volunteers that want to share either one of the answers or all of their answers, or have any questions about some of these answers to even think about answering?
Well, I can help out with just answering that second bullet. Who does your program serve? All of the programs are serving adults with intellectual disabilities who have exited the K-12 system. Most are between the ages of usually 19 and 26, but we have some programs that have some adults that are in their 30s, 40s, and 50s that are part of their programs. And so, you know, I think most of what the folks on the call today would be the mentor program would be specifically to serve that group of individuals.
And what are some of those hopeful learning outcomes that if anyone that participates in that program, what would your hope that they at least take one thing away from the program by participating in it?
So we hope they take away many things from it, but I think if we had to pick only one, we would want our students to leave with increased self-determination skills, having found their voice and being able to create their own path moving forward.
That's great. And the reason why I want to focus on learning outcomes is because it really helps build the framework in which you're going to do your entire training around, right? Because if your outcome is you know, having that self-confidence, then how are you going to train your mentors to help the mentees become more confident moving forward? So that's why it's super important to kind of focus on these learning outcomes. We do a summer institute that kind of focuses on a deeper dive into SOAs. I know that's where I met Drew and a few other of the colleagues, but it really helps kind of ask those deeper questions to help build out what is the framework that I want to use moving forward with this program. So thank you for those answers. I'm going to stop sharing this screen and going to open up a new window because the next part is showing you the wonderful, I say wonderful because I've been looking at it for about 2.5 years, but the new application that is online now. All right, can y'all see this screen okay?
Yes, yes, it's going up great, Mike.
Great. Okay, so this is our new application for certification, and I'm going to work through each of the sections and kind of discuss what we look for, and then really pause on the program narrative part and other things that are important. So the cool thing about this application is that you can save a draft and you can always come back to it. So I always advise people treating it more like a stew and letting it like marinate and sit for a while and then add to it as you continue to answer some of these questions that we've talked about. And then when we'll get into the deeper part of the training aspect and what those topics look like, I can kind of share with you the new categories that we've gathered as opposed to the required topics. So section 1 is very simple. Section 1 is all about the program information. So where your campus is located, what type of institution are you with, the training program or the center in which you're housed. This one, if you're a new program, you would just type in 000, but once you are certified, you get a program ID. Type of certificate, this is where we talked earlier about a single program or multiple programs filing under the same application. Here you would just choose, if it's just you and only one campus, single program, single campus. Payment, again, the fee we talked about earlier. You can submit that on our website. Point of contact is very important because some people, we know that higher ed has a lot of turnover, so we want to put as many contacts in the office as possible, because if someone does leave, we want to make sure that certification reminders are being sent to the right person and not just going to an empty email inbox. And 1.8 is where we start talking about that program narrative. And that's why I kind of asked those questions in the previous slide. What populations do you serve, and describe the profile of the student that is being served. And luckily with this new application, you can see these prompts here kind of give you a key look into what we're looking for here. So here we're looking any context which designed your program to help reviewers understand your structure better. Because remember, this is going to a team of reviewers that may not know anything about your program or who it serves. And so we want to use the program narrative to educate the reviewer to get a better understanding of what they're looking at when they're going through your application. 1.9 is basically the program structure and how and who provides things at each of the following areas. Sometimes it's different people, sometimes it's the same person for all 3 boxes. But this is kind of where you kind of tell us who is in charge of that. And then finally, 1.10 is that program objective or philosophy. Again, it's super important to know your goals of your program and know those outcomes and what your philosophy is, because it really sets the stage of how you're going to build out the rest of your program. So that is always a great thing to start with. And that's it for section 1. So very much informative. Section 1 is all about the program and who it serves, and giving a better understanding to the review team about what you do. Section 2, this starts getting into that first pillar of hiring or selection. So this is when you say, here is what we do for this pillar. So 2.1, you're going to describe your interview process. This is, again, giving the program narrative to the review team of how you choose it. And what we want to know is that you're just following, if again, it should look familiar from what we talked about earlier in the first part of the workshop. Here you have the interview process, because there should be an interview process. Here is the recommendation part. How are you providing it and who provides it? And then that minimum GPA. We want to know how you verify it. Is it with a transcript, or do you have access to the transcripts in your we call ours our Orion system. And then kind of a little bit more narrative of how you determine the GPA requirement for your program. Again, there's no right answer here. We just want to make sure that you have something set for your program. And then if you do more than one level of training, this is where you would discuss how you select the people that do the more advanced training. Is it open to everyone? Is it only open to team leaders, or do you not have one? So that's it for section 2. Section 2 is all about hiring, and that's kind of where you answer those questions. Section 3 is about the training development and the copyright. Again, CRLA is real big on copyright, so make sure if you are using materials that you tell us where you are pulling those from and how it is in compliance with copyright laws. And then down here, level 3.4, or section 3.4. This is what will unlock the rest of the application if you're doing multiple levels. So if you're just doing one level, then it's already selected for you. You don't have to worry about anything. If you are a level 2 or level 3 program, you have to check these boxes, because if you don't, the level 2 and level 3 questions will not appear. So right now with level 1 selected, you can see it says level 1 questions, and then it goes down, and that's the end, and it goes to section 6. But if I select level 2, when I scroll down, you'll see the level 1 section, and then you'll see the level 2 section. Okay, so it's very important that you click that box. If you don't see the level 2 questions, it's probably here in 3.4, why that didn't appear. And then finally, 3.5, what type of program are you doing? Again, remember I talked about peer education is more of an umbrella term. So here's where you would specify, oh, we're a mentor program, or we're a coach program, or we have classroom leaders, academic recovery, whatever you type of program here is, that's where you would talk about that. All right, so this is the big piece, and this is what I wanted to show you, the training breakdown, because this is what's different from years past. Again, in years past, we had a specific number of topics that you had to do, and then you filled out the rest of your training with electives. Here, it's a little different now. So with section 4.1, you are going to tell us, is it a 4-credit course? Is it a not-for-credit course, or a series of meetings and sessions? Most of the programs do a series of meetings and sessions. What amount of time does it generally take for a peer educator to complete your training? This one, we recommend that it shouldn't take more than a year for each level. So they should be able to complete level 1 in the calendar year whenever you start. Some people do it per quarter or a semester, but we really think that the year is the maximum that you can do for each level. Generally speaking, how many peer educators participate in your training at this level? Again, these are level 1 questions. So for us, everyone has to do our level 1 training. So we would just put the entire Student Success Center, 250 leaders need to go through this training. Again, there's no right or wrong answer here. We just want to know approximately how many people are going through the trainings at each of the levels. Section 4.4 is the biggest part of the application. And this is why I skipped over it in the first part, because I wanted to show you here. It's a lot easier to explain when you're seeing it on the application. But here are the different categories that we have changed our requirement for. And the good news is these match with the tutor side. So if you're a program that is trying to do both, the new thing that you can count the workshop towards both certifications. So in the past, you had to do a tutor workshop, and then you had to do a peer mentor workshop. But now you can just do a listening skills workshop and it count for either a tutor or a peer educator. You don't have to do separate trainings anymore. So that is a very nice development. So I'll start with level 1. Level 1 is the basics. So these are, no matter what you do with your programs, these are the 4 that you have to do when you are building out your training. And so you'll see here the 2 different columns, TIS and non-TIS. TIS refers to trainer-led, is the T, interactive, and synchronous. So I talked about having those self-paced study. Those would be non-TIS. So when I gave our example earlier of the administrative policies and procedures, at UT Dallas, they go through a 2-hour training on that before they even get to us. So when I would select this box, I would say 2 of those hours are non-TIS. And then here is where you would say the do's and don'ts conducting a successful session, role of a peer educator. We want to know how much time you spent in your training on those. Again, each one should be at least 30 minutes. But again, that's just the bare minimum. For myself, I always have a 1 workshop equals 1 hour rule. Again, that's for me personally, that's not CRLA's rule. That's just how I can kind of manage it in my head. And then the delivery methods used. So for this section, for these workshops, you would just check the different types of methods used for all of these four that you see here. So I would select online module or learning management system, because this administrative policies and procedures, it's a 2-hour workshop that is done with modules. So they have to complete that, and it's being done with that. For these other three, I like doing them in person and interactive and synchronous. So I do a lecture and we do a discussion, and we also do some scenario-based role plays. So those are the things that I would select for this section. So these are the required four. It says select all for basics, and then you're done with that section. So if you're looking at how to build out a training, I would highly recommend going and just looking at the application and seeing what makes the most sense for your program. Again, even if you aren't doing certification, it's such a great resource to have to build out the foundation of a training program. And then you can kind of see which campus partners can help facilitate some of these things. We got the Comm Lab, our communication lab on campus, to come in and do 2 workshops, one on communication styles and one on active listening and responding. And so I didn't have to put it on. Our communication lab helped do those things. So so that's where I would select 2 of those. Again, bare minimum. So you could do all 4 if you wanted to. That would be a very robust training. And we want to be mindful of information overload. So we feel like 10 hours throughout the calendar year is a great number to do. But by all means, if you want to do more than that, that is okay with us. So you would, again, select the types of things, the delivery methods for this section, and then this section's done. I'm going to show you level 2 or level 1. You got to select at least 2 from these. We like to do advanced study skills, goal setting, and time management, because we have academic success coaching. If you want to do 30 minutes for each one, that is great as well. And then you, the one thing that I also wanted to do, remember I talked about our FERPA and our Title IX. Those are both, I think this one's 45 and this one's 45. So when you look at which ones you can count towards, again, you can do all 3 should you choose, but the bare minimum is at least 2 in the learning techniques, and then 1 in the ethics, and then at least 1 in the electives. Now, this is where it gets kind of complicated with the electives, because if you're just doing level 1, you have a whole host of electives to choose from the other level 2 and level 3. So there's a wide list of workshop topics that you could possibly do. And if you don't see something on this list, working with specific populations, note-taking in the disciplines, I mean, again, it's a wide range of topics. But if you see something that would make sense on your campus, but you don't see here, you can always select a topic based on our institutional programmatic needs. And that could be, 2 hours if you wanted to. Like there's no right or wrong answer when it comes to your electives. We just want to make sure that you are selecting the right curriculum. And that's why I call it like a choose your own curriculum. But we want to make sure that you are selecting the right curriculum for your program. Any questions on this level 1, these level 1 categories? Is it making sense? I've spent 2 years looking at this, so for me, it obviously makes sense, but I'm always curious when first timers see this, what they think of the application.
There are no questions, Michael, but it seems to be pretty well laid out to me.
Yeah, it's exciting for us. And also this is just the test site, but down here when you actually are doing it on the live version, these will auto-populate. So you'll see your total time in TIS hours, you'll see your total time in non-TIS hours. And remember, each level is 3 hours max of non-TIS. So if you're doing level 3, you can use 3 hours at each level, so 9 hours of TIS, and those can be online modules, those can be videos, those can be, I know some companies offer box training where they can they give you about 7 or 8 different boxed topics that you can do on your own. So, so here, this is where you would input all that information. And when we get to the file upload, basically what we're looking for is any supporting evidence that you can do or show the review team that you actually do it. So if you're doing a course, if you're doing that 1 hour credit course, you would just upload your syllabus for this part. Or if you have a schedule of events, you would just upload that calendar of when those sessions are being held. Section 5 is a little more in depth, and this is something that's newer because we want you to pick a sample topic out of the 10 or 12 topics that you've selected. We want you to pick one and tell us about it. So, well, for level 1, we want you to pick 2, but for this section, we want you to pick one. So if you really like your active listening and responding workshop, here's where we would tell you or ask, okay, write your SOA here. So what is your standard for this workshop? What is your outcome for this workshop? And what is your type assessment? And let me pull up another document real quick. Hang on, I'm going to stop this share. Because while we're talking about SOAs, I really want us to look at the document that our team spent a lot of hours on. All right. Sometimes when I open up Adobe Acrobat, it makes the PDF 500%. It always freaks me out. All right, screen share. All right, so can y'all see our SOA document?
Yes, it's there.
Okay, so this is a document that really can help build out a lot of the information that you're looking for. And let me get to a section that you can see what I'm talking about. A lot of forwards, a lot of program information. I should have had this pulled up already. So here you can kind of see the training topics by the levels. And then when you get into our specific one, it's a 48-page document, and this is just level 1. When it's going to have levels 2 and 3, it's going to show quite a bit. So let me just pick conducting a successful session. So if I chose, and this is why I think this document is so helpful, because if I wanted to choose conducting a successful session as one of my example topics for level 1, I would literally, and you can change this. These are guidelines. These aren't, it's not the Bible, and you can't change anything. Of course, you can change anything that makes sense for you. But the standard for conducting a successful session is the peer educator structures and delivers the peer session using an effective methodology as chosen by the program. So that's the standard. The outcome is the peer educator can explain the steps and methodology used in conducting a successful session. And that's whatever methodology you want to use. So when we were talking about outcomes, we want to make sure that there's just something in place that allows you to say, by the end of this session, they can do what? And for this one, it's to explain the steps and methodology used. And how do we assess it? Well, you can assess it in quite a different number of ways. The peer educator practices delivering mock sessions that incorporates the procedures outlined in training. So that's one, is just doing a mock session. Another type that you could do is, while watching a recording of a mock session, the peer educator can identify the appropriate methods and the inappropriate methods of conducting a session. So this is why this document is super helpful, because it removes any guesswork, and it gives you the standards that we have already collected together from a wide range of programs. So if you choose to do this one, you can literally copy and paste the things that are here into the application and save yourself a lot of time and effort. Here's one for the peer educator do's and don'ts. Again, the outcome, once they go through the workshop of the peer educator do's and don'ts, they should be able to exhibit expected behaviors of their position as outlined in the job description. Okay. And it's written very vaguely because we don't, every program is different. We kept it vague for a reason. So if you were looking at how to, enhance some of these standards and outcomes, that is something that you can work with your team. But again, if you're looking at an assessment for the peer educator do's and don'ts, they will verbally explain the specific aspects of the job description. So do they understand the role of the peer educator? Let's go down to my favorite one, active listening and responding. It has an asterisk here because that is something that can be used as well on the tutor side. So if you see the asterisk, it means that this workshop can be doubled for both tutor and mentor. So the standard, the peer educator demonstrates active listening and responding skills in the mentor coaching process, which may include verbal and nonverbal cues. Great, that is a great standard to have. What is the outcome after they go through that workshop is that they will intentionally incorporate active listening and paraphrasing strategies into the session in order to help ensure content understanding and enhance the experience. Great. So now that we've looked at this document, you can see how that plays into, let me open up the second part. You can see how that plays into this sample topic right here. So if I chose that, I could, which CRLA standard best aligns with your topic? I could just literally go to the standards part and copy that. I'm copying from a PDF. And I can paste that right there. And that's it. And so if you choose to use our SOA document for the standards and outcomes and assessments, this is kind of where you would put that information. I highly recommend it. Every workshop that you do should have some sort of learning objective, and well delivered training starts with the SOAs. So any questions on SOAs or how we would develop those?
Remember to unmute yourself or post in the chat so Michael can answer your questions. This is very thorough, and it seems like a lot of time has gone into thinking about what people will need to enter so that they won't miss any information. So I appreciate that.
It's taken a long time to come to this point. So I don't know if you can see the smile on my face, but
yeah, I do.
Excited that it is finally launched, because for the last 2 years, I've been having to kind of explain the old application with what the new changes were coming. And now that it's here, I only have to focus on the new application. So it's very exciting. But also a lot of thought went into it with a number of different people from CRLA. And we wanted to make it as simplified as possible, but also still asking the right questions to make sure, because in the past, before online technologies and application forms, people would have to send binders full of training to CRLA to get it certified. And so I'm thankful that I live in an era where we can ask some questions and have people upload things to the cloud and then not have to worry about binders full of training materials. So
it's very clean, Michael. The layout is just very clean to me. So
thank you. So once we get through the SOAs for each of the ones, whether you wrote them yourself or you use the handbook for the SOAs, then we get down here, and whenever you see an upload button, all that means is what supporting documents that can you prove that you do these things. Again, this is the honor system. We trust that what you say in this application that you're going to do. But here it kind of gives us that supporting evidence. So if you have a lesson plan or a detailed outline for your training, there's where you would upload it on this one. If you had any PowerPoints or materials used for the active listening one, you would upload your active listening PowerPoint or handout with the second one. And then if you used any material that has copyright and that's not your own, we just will ask that you upload an annotated bibliography to show that, this is where we pulled the information. And that's kind of it for section 5. Again, for level 1, we ask that you do this for 2 topics. So you'll see down here 5.2, it's the same questions, the same thing, but you pick a different topic. So for advanced study skills, you would do your standard outcome and assessment, and then again, upload a detailed plan if you have one, any material that you have for this one. And that's why we ask that you pick your 2 favorite, because hopefully if you pick your 2 favorite, you already have this material written and you know how you want to upload it. So when we go to level 2, you're going to see a similar layout. You see that the color has changed now to a gray, but you'll still see the categories are still the same. We still have basics, communication, learning, ethics, and electives. With level 2, we're asking the same questions. Are there a series of meetings? How often does it happen? Who participates in level 2? And then from here, the categories are different. I mean, the categories are the same, the topics are different. So you'll notice right here that this says required. So for level 2 and level 3, a review of the previous levels is required. And this can look like a host of different things, but for level 2, we ask that you at least take a moment and review some of the topics, some of the things that they've learned from level 1. I've seen this done quite a few ways. The one thing that I really enjoy seeing that programs do for this specific topic is all they do is a discussion. And what they do is they break up their peer leaders. And again, depending on how many you have, but let's say there's 10 peer leaders, they would break them up into small groups and they would assign them a topic from level 1. So we go back up here to level 1 and they would assign a small group. Let's say group number 1, you're going to be in charge of do's and don'ts. Group number 2, you're going to be in charge of conducting a successful session. Group number 3, you're going to be in charge of the role of a peer educator. Group 4, you're going to be in charge of active listening. And what they do is they take about 5 minutes and their goal is to present to the rest of the class that specific category in a condensed manner. So it helps them reflect on the things that they've used in the past with the level 1 training, but it also serves as a refresher to remind them, hey, we went through this training and here are some of the big takeaways from some of those topics. So you can do this in a number of different ways. That's my favorite one that I've seen. You could also just review each of some of the highlights from the topics yourself. You don't have to put it back on the leaders, but as I mentioned earlier, I enjoy using level 2 and level 3 as more of a discussion-based sort of group effort than just me standing up there in front of a podium for an hour lecturing at them about topics. As you can see here, this one is required. And then from here, you choose 2 additional ones. Again, bare minimum, but if you wanted to do 3, that is totally fine. And then the same process, you're adding the minutes here and how many minutes are added for each one. And our hope is that, again, each level that you're offering at least 10 hours of training. So again, if you wanted to do every single topic and just lower it down to 30 minutes each, and you'll still hit that 10-hour mark by the time you get to the end of the application. Level 2 communication, again, a little bit more in depth. So not just listening skills, but we're giving constructive feedback. We're working with faculty and staff, or working with specific populations, whether they be, first-gen students, students with disabilities, whatever population you can focus on in this workshop. Role modeling, intercultural communication. So I'm just gonna expand these so you can kind of see the process is still the same as level 1. Learning techniques, again, memory and retrieval, note-taking in the disciplines, critical thinking, assessing their needs, assessing their behaviors, stress management. We get into ethics and equity with universal design, gender identity. Again, some of these I know I cannot speak on. And this is where these level 2 and level 3 workshops, we get guest speakers to come in for like stress management. We get a counseling center to come in and talk about that. We get our gender center to come in and talk about gender identity. So again, it doesn't have to be all about you. You can definitely bring in guest speakers. And then finally, our electives. Again, you can choose one from a different level. If you are doing level 2, sorry if this is a fast scroll, but I'm trying to go back up to level 1. If you use a level 2 workshop and here as an elective, you can't use the same workshop for level 2. You have to do something different. So if you wanted to use a role modeling workshop in level 1, if you wanted to use role modeling for level 2, it has to be a different type of workshop. It cannot be the exact same one if you're substituting it. So make sure you keep that in mind if you are using dual. Like for example, for us, we like to do a time management workshop for level 1, but we also like to do a time management advanced workshop for level 2. So it just depends on how you want to break out that training. The difference between level 1 and level 2, when we scroll down into section 5, is we only ask for 1 sample topic instead of 2, like for level 1. So for level 2, you only need to choose 1 of the topics, use the probing questions, and then you do the same thing. You do the SOA, and then you upload any material that supports that probing questions workshop there. So that's the meat of this part of the training, because when you try and do it all at once, it just feels like a big old headache. That's why we recommend taking it in pieces and making sure that you're breaking out each of the components by themselves and figuring out what you're going to do for each one. And then when you figure out the hiring and you figure out the experience and the evaluation, then you can sit down and spend a whole day dedicated to training and thinking about what do you want your training to look like. And that's why I advise people pull up the application, because it's super helpful to do it concurrently with, okay, these are the ones that are required and here are the ones available from this category. So if you have any questions on the training part, this is the biggest part of the application, and I'm always going to be around to help answer any of those questions. But again, Drew mentioned earlier, it's very daunting, but it's not as scary when you get into it.
But I wanted to share, and I'm sure that other folks are seeing this. The thing that I loved about the CRLA certification is that there's such a framework there. Not only is there a framework of what you need to do, because I was coming into it thinking I knew what mentoring might be, but you're always wanting to make sure that you truly understand what the big picture is. It gave me that. But then when I got into the workbook and I was able to go to the Institute with some folks from a couple of our different programs, and I see that you have this set up the same way. You're giving all those examples. How are you going to do this? Through role play? Are you going to do this? Just upload your PowerPoint, upload a detailed outline of what you're doing. I mean, I don't know how you could make this any easier or any more guided than you really have. I mean, and the cost is so reasonable. I'm going to encourage lots of I wish we would have had more folks today join in, but I'm really going to encourage our programs to look at this, because mentors, students with intellectual disabilities need mentors on a post-secondary campus, or some type of support at different points, more than other points maybe, but definitely everybody's going to need that at some point. And this is just so anyway, I am very impressed with this. Is this I have to ask Michael, is this in Salesforce?
No.
It's not, because it looks like the Salesforce platform that we use for our application.
Oh, really?
It looks identical to the Salesforce platform that we use.
It is handwritten. I say handwritten. It is hand typed by the management that CRLA uses. So he's been coding this for 5 years now.
Really?
Yeah. Or maybe he pulled the code from Salesforce, for all I know. I don't know. I don't look at.
I'm telling you. Well, and I know a lot of coding is similar, but I'm telling you that the person has done a great job.
Yeah, we really, our focus was to make it as user-friendly as possible, because
Yeah.
even here, there's 8 sections. That's a lot of sections to go through, and try to break it down into the most important ones, and it flows way better than, I know Gwen's original application did not look like this, so she's probably shaking her head.
Probably
Saying,
so.
why can I wait? But this again, a lot of work and effort went into this. And I think the thing that I enjoy the most about this process is you don't need to apply for certification. Certification has many benefits, but step one, like you mentioned, Drew, is the framework of just creating a program.
Yeah.
And then once you have it, then the application of applying for certification becomes a no-brainer because you're already doing it.
You're already
But
exactly.
yeah, so yeah, I appreciate the kind words, but it's been such a team effort in trying to get all the feedback from people that have come to the institute and have applied over the hundreds of programs that have applied, and hopefully we're at a place where we're making it not as daunting, because even though I've been speaking for about 2.5 hours now, it still seems like it's such a daunting thing, and we want to make it as user friendly as possible. So the last few parts of this application are very simple. It's more program narrative than anything. But section 6 is asking how you're tracking the training. So going back to that narrative of, okay, how are you ensuring that your peer leaders accrue that 10 hours? And how are you going to track it? For us, we use Academia, which tracks any of our workshops that we put on. And that's a new thing. When I first started, I was tracking it by pen and paper. We had a sign-in sheet, and they wrote their name on it. And I would kept track of all the different leaders that came in, and I could transition that into an Excel sheet. And so it was very old school for a while. And luckily, we now have a online tool that helps keep track of all those things, because that was getting a little out of hand with all the leaders coming through our programs. But yeah, we've seen anything from a software that keeps track of it to the old school pen and paper Excel sheet, keeping track of those hours there. But for section 6, we just want to know, how do you track it? How are you going to keep a record of all the people that come through to ensure that they've met the training requirements? And then we ask down here, what happens if someone misses a training? So for us, it's required. So we offer a makeup course for some of our trainings. But if they don't attend that, then they're not able to continue their employment. So that's a UT Dallas Student Success Center rule. But some programs are just voluntary. They have the training, they have the certification, and it's available for the students, but it's still not mandatory. So if maybe the first few hours are mandatory, maybe they have to go through the FERPA training, they have to go through some of the do's and don'ts to be a peer educator. But if they don't do the other workshops, some programs are okay with that. It's there, it's available for the students should they want to, work through the professional development and get the benefit of completing certification. But if they don't, it's not anything that the program is going to fire them for or do anything, not continue their employment. But that's up to the program. So here is kind of where you would just upload any supporting evidence that keeps track. So for us, I would just upload an example of how our software keeps track of the workshops. In years past, when I've submitted, I just included the Excel sheet that I use to keep track of all the trainings there. So section 6 is basically, how are you keeping track of the training? Section 7 is, how are you keeping track of all the experience, which is different, because you want to be sure that when you're keeping track of the experience, that you're not just using a timesheet, because as we know, timesheets may not show the full picture. So we just want to make sure that you have a way of distinguishing contact hours versus maybe prep hours or hours that are not spent with the mentees. So that's where you would explain it in section 7. Section 8 is the last section, and it's all about the evaluation. So remember, we talked about earlier, it needs to happen at least on an annual basis. So you would just check this. If you do it on an annual basis, we do it on a semesterly basis. So I would check that. And then here you're just kind of describing the evaluation process. For us, we do kind of a 360 evaluation where the supervisor will evaluate them and sit in on the observation, and their colleague, their peer colleague, will sit in and observe on a peer observation. And then the mentee will fill out a survey and regarding the mentor. So that's where I would explain this here in section 8.2. And again, it's not required that there's a 360 evaluation, but it is required that the mentee does fill out some sort of questionnaire on the mentor itself. And then finally, when does that follow up? When does that sharing of the results happen? And then 8.3 just asks to upload a sample evaluation. Make sure that if you do apply and you are uploading documents, that all names and ID numbers and things, all privacy information is blacked out or obscured, because we definitely don't want that. And then you hit save, and then you submit your completed application, and it goes to us. And oh, one thing I didn't do, because I didn't check the box, so I forgot that it was here. I wanted to show you real quick as I scroll up and make everyone nauseous. Right here, level 3. So now that I clicked level 3, you'll see those topics expand after we get through level 2. Here we go. So now you see they're in bright orange, my favorite color. But you'll see some of the topics here for level 3. Again, I mentioned the review of level 1 and 2 is required, and then picking at least 2. But you can see from some of these topics, just the name alone, conducting a programmatic needs assessment. All right, that's definitely a master level type workshop. The role of coaching, mentoring, and learning centers in higher education. Again, we're just going really in depth into theory-based topics and how they can really help. The cool thing about level 3 people or level 3 students is that they can start helping with the level 1 workshops and the level 2 workshops because they're trained through all those things. So they can really in turn turn around and help you be an extension of your supervisor self and help lead some of these workshops and lighten that load as well. So so here's some of the other communication for level 3, learning and study skills for level 3, ethics and equity for level 3, like operating a learning center, like that's a pretty high level workshop. And then finally, some more electives to choose from. But again, all we're remembering here is that each level is 10 hours minimum of training. And then we just want to know how you do it. And much like level 2, we only ask for 1 of the sample workshops here, and then you upload that, and then you're good to go. So that is the new application. Again, if certification is in your future and you have a question about any of these topics here, please feel free to message me about it. Because again, you will have questions, and I enjoy answering the questions on the front end before you apply, not after you apply. So if certification is in your future, or if you need to renew and it looks a little different, this will be the place that you go. So yeah, that's all about the application. Any questions about the application? All right, let me pull up my other PowerPoint. We only have a few more slides left. All right, we left off here defining our program. So now you can kind of see why we ask these questions in this workshop, because it really, it gets that motor going on what you want the overall, like Drew mentioned, the high level picture of your program. And then we just go down into a funnel in the nitty gritty of those details and how we get there. So knowing the program outcomes, knowing who you serve in your program is a great way to start, and then filling in the pieces with the training and how you get those mentors to help with those outcomes is the ultimate goal. So I can't stress enough how important it is to have those outcomes for your program and have your mission statement for moving forward with a quality program. A few tips for application. Again, like I mentioned, strategically plan which level you want to do. I've seen time and time again where people think that you have to start at level 1 only, and then you apply for level 2, and that's not how it goes. You can apply for level 3 from the start. If you have a robust training and you want to offer level 3 certification, you can do that from the get-go. Or again, if you're a smaller program and know you only have the mentors for a semester or two, level 1 is perfectly fine. So just strategically plan for a few years out how you want to offer your workshops and how much bandwidth you have to offer those trainings. Submitting evidence for certification. Again, organizing all your documents is key. Mapping out your training hours and topics. Again, having that done ahead of time will help you easily fill out that application. So I highly recommend when you're building out your training plan or your ideas for training, do it alongside the application, just so you know you're not having to do multiple checks and guesses. You can see it there and start from a place of that framework that we talk about building out a solid program. The training is the key component to that. And then finally, just remember to follow the copyright requirements. That's a big one. We don't want to make sure that we are plagiarizing anything and we are attributing the sources to where they're supposed to be. I know Drew mentioned our CRLA training book, but these are some other ones that are helpful. And I highly recommend the active training one. If you are new to training, it is quite a field to understand. And if you have zero experience, this active training book by Silverman and Bike is really helped me understand the do's and don'ts of training and how to create something where you're not just lecturing for 60 minutes and that there's active participation. They're getting into the deeper levels of learning when you start talking about Bloom's taxonomy and things like that, that they're not just remembering things. They are really being able to implement some of those trainings. And at the end of the day, that's what we want, because as you can see from some of our standards, outcomes, and assessments, a lot of those things are behavioral and things that they need to display, not just remember. So having that active training for your resources is a great way to have your students not like hate training. A lot of our students love coming to training because it's so interactive and it's so, they learn so much coming out of it. But that starts with having that active training. So these are some of the resources that I highly recommend when you are looking at building out some of the training things. And the last thing is just, my name is Mike Sines. The assistant coordinator is Ashley Lewis. We are both available to help with any other questions you may have. Again, it is a fun process, but it is a lengthy one in terms of if you're starting from scratch, you have a lot of things to decide on the future of your program. So we are always here to help. We have many ways to get a hold of us, but if you want to get a hold of us via email, that's probably the most preferred. We frequently set up Zoom meetings and help people walk through the process themselves. So again, we are here to help. I'll open it up back to Drew if there's any questions or concerns. I am here.
Drew,
Yes.
this is Joanne Pagano. I have a question for Michael. Do you have any suggestions or tips in recruiting mentors?
Yeah, so with recruiting, we really enjoy talking with faculty members. We really want to get feedback from the people that can see them on a day-to-day basis. And like I mentioned earlier, it's the students that are active in other areas of campus. So a lot of the times, especially at UT Dallas, we have a freshman mentor program, we have a transfer mentor program, we have a first year leader program, we have our orientation leaders. A lot of the times we advertise to the people that are already involved on campus, because some of these programs don't take up a lot of their time, but they have that itch to help and give back to the university. So we really enjoy reaching out to the programs that are already established and that have the bandwidth to do both. Sometimes you find that super overachiever that is an orientation leader and they're a freshman mentor and they're taking 21 hours. And you're like, okay, well, that's a little bit too much. I don't think helping us would be the right thing. But sometimes you'll find someone that is only taking 12 or 15 hours and they're only involved in maybe an organization or two. And they really have some extra bandwidth to help, be a mentor and give back. But it's all dependent on how much you utilize them. I don't know if anyone else wants to mention how many hours. So for us, they only work anywhere from 6 to 9 hours a week. Some mentors only work 3 hours a week. So it really just depends on how much you want to utilize them and if they're able to do it. But recruiting starts with the people that can see them frequently, whether it's faculty, whether it's staff. But I also highly recommend looking at people that are already involved on campus because they're the ones that are more likely to pick up another involvement with your group.
And I'd also say, that I would think that the Career Center, because folks that become a mentor, if you are a certified program, and Michael, I really like what you said at the beginning about, that at the end of the year, you have a celebration. And whenever you give the certificate, whenever folks receive their certificates, because for young professionals who are just going out in the field, having a certificate, having what I would call a credential,
Yep.
that they can show in there whenever they're building their resume to say, look, I'm an internationally certified mentor. I mean, that's impressive just in the terminology itself, let alone that they have a certificate and that they've done this many hours of mentorship, which really would make an employer think, oh, well, this person likes giving back. This person also knows how to mentor others. I mean, that's something that I think most employers are looking for whenever they're hiring someone. And that's one of the things that I thought could really be such a benefit in this program. Another thing that crossed my mind while I was thinking of all this is that, the students who are in our programs who are maybe in their second year or their third year, the students that are in the FPCTP, the Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program, they might want to become a mentor to someone who's just coming in the program. If they've developed that level of independence and that level of knowledge about the campus or about some specific area where mentoring could be beneficial, for those students to mentor and for them to receive that credential that, you're a certified mentor, you've provided this much. I mean, there's just lots of different ideas that can just keep going through your mind about this. I just hope that, I know we've got, Gwen and the folks at FAU certainly have a good program. I know that at the University of North Florida, that Tara Rowe has a certified program, and that's serving the students in their Thrive program. Others have certainly used this. We've handed out this workbook to lots of folks. So lots of folks are using this. And this whole, and you just took all of the paperwork away from, because you can save the draft and come back to it anywhere and put in more information over that period of time with your certification. So again, just any thoughts that anyone has or suggestions or support that you may need.
I really like talking about, again, the certification from the standpoint of just having it as a foundation of a fresh program. But because I don't like to do this presentation as like a pitch of, hey, we want you to apply for certification. I always try and angle it towards starting with the framework first. And then if certification is right for you, then that's great. But like Drew mentioned, with the benefits of certification and having faculty and upper administration know that you are certified with a international program. I have tons of students that come back to me and say, hey, I put my level 2 certification on my resume and it came up in my interview and they were asking about it. And I was like, oh, well, I've done this workshop, and I helped, mentor all these people. And it really helps set them apart from someone that may not have gone through the certification. So when we're talking about the benefits of certification, there's so many great things. It helped us with our faculty involvement too. When I first got to UT Dallas, it pained me to say this, but we had faculty in the math department put in their syllabus, do not go see the Student Success Center math lab because they do not know what they're talking about. Because before we got there, they weren't being trained at all with any sort of standard or framework of the CRLA certification. So I'm happy to report they have now taken that out of their syllabus and they do not discourage people from coming to see us in the Student Success Center. But it starts with that, hey, we are training them properly. We have this nationally recognized program that they're going through the training. And so, but yeah, it is a great benefit of certification.
Well, thank you. Well, I'd like to thank you, Mike, for sharing this great information with us today. It's great to always to partner with you. The way you present information is so practical, and you certainly know this area so well. So thank you very much. And to those of you who have been with us today and have stuck it out till the end, thank you for being here. And I wish you all a wonderful week of Thanksgiving next week. And if you have questions about this or need more information, or again, if you need a workbook, please, somebody's already asked for a workbook and I think it's already been mailed while during the workshop from the office. We're here to provide support. So if we don't have any other comments before we go.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the time to explain about certification. It's always fun talking to this group.
Lots of great information, Michael. Thank you so much.